with this final panel and the idea of potentially expanding the NWSL throughout the country, and if it were to expand in Texas, where would we expand? And I'm really pleased to welcome our panelists today: James Clarkson, head coach of the Houston Dash; Victoire Cogevina Reynal, the CEO of a new app, Gloria Football; and Ina Patel, the head of soccer operations for Angel City FC. Now, this is a really diverse group of panelists, so before we get going, I just want to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves, explain your position
with this final panel
and your role,
and the idea of potentially expanding the NWSL throughout the country, and if it were to expand in Texas. Our panelists today: James Clarkson, head coach of the Houston Dash; Victoire Cogevina Reynal, the CEO, head of soccer. I just want to give you all a chance to.
I think we're having technical difficulties. One moment.
All a chance to.
Hi, welcome to the very last panel of today, Friday, February 12th, at the 2021 Texas Soccer Summit. I'm so excited to introduce James Clarkson, the head coach of the Houston Dash; Victoire Cogevina Reynal of the Gloria Football app; Ina Patel, head of soccer operations for Angel City FC. And today we are going to talk about expanding the women's sport in the United States. Now we have a really diverse group of panelists today. So first, I really want to make sure that I give everyone the chance to introduce themselves to our viewers here today. James, maybe we can start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in the sport and how long you've been with the Dash?
Sure. I'm the head coach of the Dash. I'm going into the third season. We've just started pre-season training. And previous to that, I was the academy director for the Houston Dynamo. So I've actually been with the Dynamo organisation now over 14 years. And so I've seen the club grow from basically just one professional team into a full club, men's and women's team and an academy. So it's been a long process. I've been in Texas now 25 years, so it's definitely home. I live here. I've been here the whole time. Got a wife and 2 kids. So Houston is definitely home for me.
And did you grow up playing the sport as well? What's your background with that?
Yeah, no, I did. I'm from England originally, and I don't know if the accent gave that away or not, but I am. And I went and played in New Zealand, went to Australia, came to the States, and the plan was to go back, but fell in love with my wife and have been here ever since. I worked in youth soccer in Houston for a club called Eclipse Soccer Club, and I worked there for 4 years. Then I became the state director of coaching for South Texas. So travelled extensively throughout South Texas, did years of coaching education at all levels, worked with the ODP program with the boys and the girls, and then, like I said, joined the Dynamo in 2006. So it's been an interesting journey, and I've seen the sport grow at all levels in Texas and specifically in Houston over the years.
That's great. And I also just want to mention before we really get going, definitely we have a diverse group here, so feel free to jump in on each other whenever you have a thought or something to say. So, but anyway, we can move on to Victoire. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you became involved in the sport, and about your new app?
Yes, so my name is Victoire Cogevina. I'm currently the CEO and co-founder of Gloria Football, which is an unreleased app that will hopefully become the world's football community. Prior to Gloria, I co-founded S All Stars, which is an agency that represented male Latin American talent into the MLS. So I was a FIFA agent in my old life. Been a big fan my entire life. I'm not a player. That's because of the countries I grew up in. Unfortunately, it was not a thing women did. But through Gloria, I'm trying to change that and hopefully can add something from my perspective. Aside from Gloria, I'm also a United Nations ambassador for gender equality in football. And I also serve the board of WIST, which is Women's Sports Tech. So I'm quite tapped into that side of things.
That's great. Awesome. And Ina, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your new venture with Angel City?
Sure. So I'm Ina Patel. I am currently the head of soccer operations at Angel City. Born and raised in LA, did spend several years in Nebraska during high school years. Moved from LA to a small town in Nebraska, and I think soccer was my outlet to kind of deal with a really big transition in my life, and it was the only sport that I played growing up. Kind of went down the law school path, focused on corporate and transactional law for about 6.5, 7 years before I joined the Colorado Rapids in 2018 as their director of player personnel. And so I worked on everything from player contracts to disciplinary issues, immigration work, and then travel, hotels, meals, relocating players, and all of that stuff. Moved back to LA at the end of 2019 and quickly got connected with Julie Ehrman, who is our founder and president of Angel City. And, when she kind of told me about the opportunity to build something from scratch in my hometown and in the only sport I played growing up, I couldn't really pass up the opportunity to kind of be a part of that and help them figure out the soccer operations side. And so that's, it's been a really interesting and exciting year. And we have about a year to go. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us. And for people just tuning in as well, I'm Johanna Gretschel. I'm the managing editor of the Striker Texas, the new destination for soccer news in the state of Texas. And I know James is the only other one in Texas, but I think you guys will have really interesting perspectives to share on our topics here today. So I would like to start with a couple questions for James, but again, feel free if you have an opinion on something, feel free to jump in. But I am kind of curious.
There's a Latin person on that panel.
Dangerous.
We just interrupt other people.
Totally fine.
Stay quiet.
It is interesting to see all this excitement about a new MLS franchise coming to Austin with Austin FC. And I think to a lot of us, it makes us wonder, now that California is going to have 2 women's teams, is there potential for another women's team to come to the state of Texas? And if it were to come to Texas, would the new Austin franchise be a natural fit for an NWSL team to join as well? So, James, I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts about the synergy between the Dash and the Dynamo, and what are the benefits for building a women's fan base when you have a built-in men's team right there as well?
A lot of questions. I'll try to go through them, but I think the simple answer is yes. There definitely needs to be more professional teams in Texas. The closest professional team to us in Houston is in a different country. So Monterrey with Tigres and Rayadas are the 2 closest professional teams to us, which is pretty crazy. So we need more competition in Texas specifically. I think it's great when you look at the Northwest, the rivalry that they've got there. Now California, you've got it on the East Coast, and I'm sure Chicago, Louisville is close enough. So Kansas City is probably the closest team to us, or Orlando. And if we can get somewhere in Texas, and I do think the MLS has a role to play in this. I think there's an obligation as the professional sport in this country to support women's sport, and I think all MLS teams should have a women's team. I don't even think it should be a discussion. I think it should be part of what it takes to become an MLS team. Should be a commitment to the growth of the women's sport, and how it's not. And you look at world football everywhere else in the world, it's there and it's happening. And you look at the development of the sport in Europe, you look at it in Mexico, in South America, how it's growing, and it's because of the support of the men's teams that's already established, and the money that's available, the resources that are there, the stadiums, the training facilities. All this should be readily available to all women, and every team should. It shouldn't even be a discussion. It shouldn't even be mandated. It should be the obligation of owners of MLS teams to have and support a women's team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just imagining.
No, that was it. Go on.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think that, all of the men's teams, all the owners should support it. When you look at infrastructure, a lot of the teams that have that support from their MLS kind of brother clubs have been able to find success and probably have had more stability in the history, in the club's history. And, one of the things for us not having that tie to an MLS club, it makes my job difficult trying to figure out where are we going to train, where are we going to train on a daily basis, how are we going to support all of these players and staff in the same way that the men's teams are supported, and how do we get that right with the resources that we have?
How much of a challenge has that been, especially this year, to come in basically during a pandemic year?
When I first met Julie in January of 2020, she wanted to play in 21. And I looked at her and I said, absolutely not, because where are we going to train? And I think Southern California, it's hard to find a natural grass pitch to play on. And when you look at colleges and universities, and there's a ton of them, a lot of them aren't able to accommodate a team that has the training needs that we need for the length of the season. And so that's been the biggest challenge. And that's been my primary focus for pretty much the last 8 months, is really where are we going to train every day? It was really nice to get the stadium deal done with LAFC, but you're looking at 12 to 15, maybe 17 days out of the year. And I'm trying to figure out on an everyday basis, where are we going to train? Because then that dictates the areas and the neighborhoods we would look at putting the players up, in terms of player housing. What airports do we fly out of? How do the logistics kind of look like on a day-to-day basis, when our stadium's not our home, and our training facility won't be our home either. So, and then you add the pandemic, and you have universities that are closed at random times, and not being able to physically go and check out a facility that might be available, and having to wait longer than you would want. So it's definitely been a heavy lift for me, but I'm hoping in the next few months, hopefully by the end of March, beginning of April, we'll have a site at least locked in for 22.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate maybe just the close relationship between Dynamo and Dash to hear that perspective.
I think it's a really big topic, and I think I'm sure Kansas City are going through a similar situation of where are they going to be able to train on a consistent basis? What's their home going to be? And I think the league's done a great job over the last couple of years, really raising the minimum standards, and that's been huge with the requirements in terms of what the housing for the players and the off the field things. There's been a huge improvement in the day-to-day, the training facilities, the staff, all of the things that are required to really elevate the level of the league. And as we expand, I think it's going to be vitally important to be able to attract international players to want to come to the league. And in part of the attraction has got to be what the facilities are like, what the day-to-day environment is like, that the whole adds to the culture, everything that you want to be part of a really successful league, successful teams. These things play a huge role in it. And when you have a city and they've got men's teams and they've got their facilities that you should be able to expand and open up to women, it seems like a no-brainer, but we're still a little bit behind, and we've got to push the envelope, and we've got to keep pushing the game, and eventually we'll get there. But at the moment, it's difficult.
And I mean, one of the unique things about Angel City, right, is the ownership model. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, Ina, the celebrity multiple buy-in model?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I don't know where the numbers are at right now. I think we might be a little above 60 different investors. And obviously, as you know, there's a mix of celebrities and entertainers, as well as 14 ex-US women's national team players. And I think for me personally, being able to work with them and leverage their experience and their backgrounds, been extremely valuable. From the former players, there's so many things that when we have conversations, they're just like, we wish we had this when we were playing. We wish there were certain resources that were available to us. And, this would have gone a long way. And it's really been great to kind of see everyone committed to building an organization that is going to be player-centric and player-focused, and having, two things that I think are going to be telling. One is, to James's point, trying to build our own training facility, and building one that from scratch, that's created specifically for this club and for the women's teams and for the women's team, and trying to do it just as good, if not better, than our MLS teams in LA. And then second is really developing a player development, player engagement curriculum that we want to run, season long, and support the players on all of the off pitch things that they're, that's important to them. And so the four pillars that we kind of decided were financial literacy, building your brand, career development, and then your health, both including mental and physical health, depending on what their needs are. And the idea that we want to help you become the best version of yourself, both on and off the pitch, and to have owners that can slate in and support us on both sides of that, I think is incredible.
I wonder if just that model of a lot of different investors, a lot of celebrities. I mean, I think all of us remember when the announcement hit the internet. It was all over Twitter. All these actors I followed were involved, right? Is that something that's like able to be replicated outside of a city like Los Angeles? I feel like LA is like, a lot of those people live there and have personal ties to there. But if we're talking about potentially bringing in, this hypothetical situation, if we could bring another women's team to Texas, do you think the challenges with putting Angel City together, is that something that could be replicated here? That's for anyone to answer.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to hear somebody else's thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm happy to pitch in, given I've been consulting for a few ownership groups coming up and trying to bid for a franchise in the league, and you're gonna see it all over the country. I think Angel City kind of made it very clear to the world that there was a good business opportunity, and at the same time, you could put your name and all your experience and your platform to push something as important as the women's game. And I think a lot of celebrities, if not corporate partners, are trying to ride that wave. And you're seeing, new ownership groups forming all over the country, which is really exciting. I'm based in Miami. I didn't say that at the beginning. I was in San Francisco before, which there's a Bay Area team coming up. And now here in Miami, there's also rumors of a pretty intense celebrity-focused ownership team coming together. I mean, I think that at this point in time, having been in the men's business for a long time, finally women's are in a place where people are looking at it as a serious investment, and they're looking at the price of the franchise, and they're saying, and they're looking at the MLS price change over time over the last 10 years. Like, it hasn't been that long. And people want to get involved, and you're seeing a lot of international investors, which I think is even more interesting, because they come with a completely different perspective around the game, which is entire topic of its own, right? But the cultural aspect of seeing, how soccer in this country, it's a women's game. It's always been a women's game, but in the rest of the world, it's not. And really seeing how European franchises are opening their own female teams, and going back to what James said at the very beginning, and how we're doing things here in the US. And we were in a place where it was a very powerful league in the sense that we had all the talent, and then suddenly the talent started leaving the country to go play for other teams. And now the big challenge is going to be how we're going to retain that, and how our new and existing franchise really compete to keep the highest or the best talent in the world in this country. So I'm excited and very curious to see how that develops.
So Miami,
Yeah,
that's what the rumors are.
Yes,
that would be nice.
yes.
But I think
I mean,
it's really important with the ownership groups that come in, that they're coming in for the right reasons, and that's to truly invest in the team, in the community, the whole thing, and that takes a lot of money. And if you're any sports owner at the moment, you're not making any money at all. You're losing it. And to be able to get into a league at this present moment with no revenue at all being generated, it's incredible that the league's still going and the league is actually growing and the attention is still there for the league. So you have to, thank those guys that have been in it for the long haul. The league's almost 10. We're in the 9th season. It'll be 10 years, and that's unheard of for a women's professional league, especially in soccer, to last that long. So I think it's definitely here to stay. But you look at Louisville, they've raised the standard with their facilities and everything that they're bringing in. The excitement around Angel City, that'll raise the level again. Then the next team that comes in, and gradually it just keeps raising the level. And then teams that have been around for a long time, they have to get more investment, they have to get more money involved, and they have to raise their standards, because it's when we keep the best players in the country, we've got to make sure that each team wants them, and they're not just going to go, I just want to go and play for this team, because they have the best facilities, they have the best investment. This is where they're going to take care of me the best. And we need that competition within the country, but globally as well, to really raise our level, raise that investment, raise the interest in the game, get it on TV constantly, raise the interest throughout. And this is one of the amazing things about when you go down to Mexico. It's not like youth. It's not like girls and their dad going to the game. There's like, grown men. It's just like a men's team, going in the crowd. And this is where I think, Portland's done an amazing job in how they've captured the city and the demographic of their fans. It's not youth soccer. It's 20 to 40-year-old people, men and women, just going because it's a really enjoyable environment. And when we can get to those levels and, teams are pulling in 15, 20,000 people every week, the thing will explode. It's incredible. And I think investors are seeing that it's coming. And if they can get in now, then hopefully they stay in for the long haul and they make the money at the back end. So it's incredibly exciting that where it is at the moment.
They will. Actually, I want to add onto what James was saying, that, to really see this league grow, there's a ton of things that need to happen, and they're already in motion. I'm particularly very invested in the commercialization of the brands within the league. And when I talk about brands, I talk about the players. I've had a lot of experience working with male players and really crafting a brand around them and a story that people ultimately buy, right? And I think that with women, there's a gigantic opportunity, because, as probably all of you know, any woman that ends up on a pitch playing professionally has gone through everything and anything. And their stories of resilience are probably some of the most inspiring that you've ever heard. I don't want to be completely subjective, but I honestly have a lot of like a front row seat to kind of hearing and understanding those stories, and people need to know them, because at the end of the day, going into a stadium to watch a women's game means much more than just going to watch a sports game. And you saw that in the 2019 World Cup in France, where 80% of stadiums were women taking their daughters, because that meant something. It meant that we were advancing as a gender, and the sport was really the vehicle to do it. It was one more vehicle where we were doing great things. And as we continue to grow here in this country, and you see a lot of the fans that go to the games, or prior to the pandemic, they were doing it to support something much bigger than just a competition. And I think really honing on to that and building those brands. And I think Angel City has done an incredible job at, taking their celebrity owners and having them stand for the sport in a way that you had never seen before. One of Angel City's investors, Alexis Ohanian, is one of my investors too. So I've seen, how these people have stand up and said, hey, like, you need to look here, and these are the stories, and these are the players, and she went through this and she went through that, and you really need to be listening, and brands need to start putting their money where their mouth is at, because that's really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of talk, but without the funding, then we can't really be doing much. And I think that there's a really big, bright future ahead of us. We just need to make it, more appealing as we can, and really tell those stories in a way that will grab attention not only women, but also men, and not only, the 20 to 40s, but the young men that are, they're 10, 12, and they're starting to turn on the TV to watch women, which is something that had never happened before. So I'm excited, very excited.
Yeah, do you guys still think it's a challenge to everyone gets really excited about the US women's national team and the Women's World Cup because the United States has created such a great around those events, but when it's not the World Cup year, how do we keep that interest in the women's sport?
Well, there's satellites events, right? Like the She Believe Cup that's coming next week in Orlando. And I mean, a big part of what we've been working with our team, specifically at Gloria, is really a lot of people have no idea that this tournament is even going on. And it's a really big deal, actually, because it's some of the best teams in the world are playing a friendly, but it's still a robin round tournament that we will see a lot of great soccer on the pitch. So tournaments like that one, or for example, the IWC, the International Women's Cup, which I think its first edition is going to be this year in Louisville, where you have Chicago and Louisville playing against international teams. Um, those are all friendly events that start raising awareness and start showing you that, hey, aside from the U.S. women's national team, there's other really talented players that will give you 2 or 90 minutes of incredible sport, and you should be tuning in to watch it. So I think it's there's much more going on, and I wish more people knew about it. I think that's really the next step, is to be able to raise that awareness, because there's a ton of people working on events on the side that are not necessarily the World Cup, or there's 4 years in between every World Cup. We should be doing so much more.
Yeah. Well, this does seem like a good opportunity to sort of turn the microscope on myself and the media. What role does the media play in promoting the women's sport, and what are some things that we can do better?
What do you think?
Me or
Johanna, sorry. I
yeah.
mean, you're in
Oh,
the
I mean,
media, right? So, like, what's your?
yeah,
I'm interested to know what's your stance again. I mean, I've been working with
yeah,
women's quite a lot
yeah. I
lately.
guess yeah. I would love to know, what you guys think we could do better. But from my perspective, I think it's just more coverage. And I mean, one of the challenges, our website's a week old at this point, but already, we have one NWSL team to cover. We have three MLS teams to cover. We have a bunch of USL teams to cover. And then there's even, USL Championship and USL League One. There's just so many more men's teams than women's teams that um, I will say that we do have two dedicated writers to the Houston Dash, which I'm really excited about. But obviously, the dynamics, it doesn't look great because there's so many more men's teams. But when you look at the college programs and you look at the youth programs, we definitely want to put as much coverage as possible into promoting women's players. And at least I guess on the college side, there are more women's college soccer programs that we can write about and promote. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's my immediate thought is we want to put more resources into it, but at the same time, to give equal coverage to all these teams, there's just not as many women's teams. Um, so yeah, what do you guys think the media could do better for the women's sport?
I'll have a go. I think, and this is related to the last question on how do you keep it relevant after the World Cup and things like that, and the interest that's around the US. I think the league's biggest asset is the players, and they are amazing people. And then they just happen to be really good at soccer, but they are amazing people, and they're all highly educated. They're incredibly smart. They're eloquent. They can talk, and it's not just the 22 that play for the US national team. I'm talking about the whole league, and every team has their own stories. Every player has their own story, and they're incredibly marketable. They're they're fit, healthy, they're role models to everybody. And I think just paying more attention to everybody that plays in the league and giving them a bigger platform is how it keeps it relevant, how it grows, how we draw more sponsors in and things like that, because these players are the biggest asset that we've got. And and they can play as well. That's the other thing. They are highly talented soccer players, but as people, they're at a different level, and they're socially aware. They're involved in everything in the community, all of it, and capitalising on that. I think part of it's the club's responsibility to make sure that the clubs are giving each player an opportunity to be promoted, and certainly from our side of things, the Dash social media and everything has done a fantastic job over the last 2 years in really promoting all of the players, and they've raised to a whole different level and a whole different profile. And now they're getting, as a club, we're now getting more national attention than we've ever had, and it's the players that are the driving force behind that. So I think capitalising on all of them, regardless of whether they play for the national team or not, or whether they're international player or American, that their stories are incredible.
Yeah, and I do want to give a huge thank you to the Dash organization as a whole. A lot of their players have participated in this conference this week, and it's been really great to start to hear some of their stories and for them to be willing to appear on this. Because not every player likes to do media, so it's been great to have people want to participate. So, thank you.
No, I think I'm genuinely lucky. I've got an incredible squad of players, but more importantly than anything, that they're incredible human beings, and that's how I look at it. They're just great people that just happen to be good at football. And when we get onto that human level, that's the most rewarding thing about everything that we do is the response that we get from total strangers or other people when they comment on basically how nice our team is and how pleasant they are and how polite and things like that. And it's these small details that really add to the culture that we're trying to build and the team camaraderie and these things. But like I said, it's words on a piece of paper without the players, and the players are really, really pushing this every single day.
And Ina, does media exposure play into your role at all, or what kind of conversations have you had around that this year?
I mean, it doesn't,
Only
but I think
Sorry.
I've been straddling the business and the soccer side, but to James's point, this industry, this sport wouldn't exist without the players, and everyone does have a different background, has a different story, and I think if we're all committed to growing this sport in the US and even globally, and part of that is hearing these stories and getting to know who these players really are, so you have the next generation of kids growing up saying, I want to be her, or I met her and she was amazing, right? And they slowly become role models. But to your point, when you were talking about just the coverage in general, I think it's, only 4% of all sports media coverage is dedicated to women's sports. And you mentioned that there's so many men's teams that you're covering, right, between USL and MLS, and there's just so many compared to the women's, but that's also what keeps the cycle going, right? Because there are more men's teams, you dedicate more time, resources, and more coverage to the men's teams, and the women are kind of always going to have just a small piece of the coverage. But I believe in, people buy in to what they know. And in order for them to be familiar with this sport, with this league and the soccer culture in the US, they need to see it. And so how do we make that happen? And part of that is a mix of a million things, right? Finding ways to tell our player stories, whether that's through community events, sponsorship appearances. Our digital media team has, amazing ideas of what to do with each player when they come in. But I think it's something that we think about on the business side and the soccer side all the time, is we need to increase the awareness and the media coverage when it comes to these matches and these athletes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, go ahead.
No, sorry. I just wanted to add because I mean, within Gloria, we haven't released the app, so we're just testing it with a few thousand people. And we just so you have some context, Gloria is an application where you can upload any football video, whether you're a girl or a boy. You can just upload any video, and then you have communities where you can interact with other people that love the same topic as you do. It could be, fans of Real Madrid and in Miami. It could be an academy that has 2,000 players and want to have a private group or space online to talk to each other. And what we've been very, very conscious about how we go on the gender equality piece. Obviously, having one of the founders is a woman, so that's a big part of what I'm doing all the time is to make sure that there's no bias, and that people launch Gloria to watch football, not to watch a woman or a man. And if I can have a 12-year-old kid, boy, seeing a 15-year-old girl crush a trick shot or something and just really look at her talent and not her gender, then we win. But how do we get there? And for us, it's really showing the content. So we are making sure that we're consistently showing a very balanced amount of women and men on the feed, and that when we're going and acquiring users or acquiring testers in this specific scenario, that we're looking for women as much as we're looking for men. And sometimes women, they're harder to find. That's the reality. But once you find them, they're also much more diligent in their content creation, in their participation in the communities. They are the ones that will be launching the app every day and making sure that their presence is noticed because they need it. We are really looking at building different features within the app that will allow women, specifically professional female players, to make more money on Gloria than they'll make with their professional contracts, which is something that we've been working really hard on, and that we want to keep pushing. So, then it becomes a good problem the league has where they need to raise their salaries too because these players are making more money with their sponsorship deals. So, anyways, it's a very big topic, but I think that when you look at the media, it's about being conscious and it's about choosing the stories and choosing the placement of the stories and really maybe spending double the time on getting the right headlines so people actually want to read the story. And as what Anna was saying, which is fantastic, it is absolutely true. If you don't know it, you don't consume it. So how do we get people to know it? And it's really by pushing it up.
Yeah, yeah, no, and definitely good points. I mean, as a woman, as a former youth soccer player, with a huge passion for the sport, obviously, I want women to be more represented in the media. So, yeah, you guys are helping me do my job tonight. So, thank you. But I'm glad you brought the app up again as well, because I was sort of curious to ask you, Victoire, a little bit about your background as an agent. And it just reading about Gloria was interesting to me, that you wanted to use it as a tool for recruiting and scouting. And I was curious if you had any observations on maybe the differences in scouting male players versus female players for athletes who are trying to make that jump to the professional level.
Yes. So initially, Gloria was very focused on players, and more specifically, players that had aspirations to become professionals. And as we continue to build the company and the product, we realized that there was a really big market for actually building an online space for the sport. Just when you really see the offline experience of going to a stadium or going and playing with your friends over the weekend or joining your family to watch a match at home, that experience is very, very powerful, and it creates a sense of community that very few other things in the world can. But when you bring that experience online, it gets lost. So today, Gloria is really focused on making that online experience as good as the one offline. by really connecting you with other people that love the same thing as you do. And obviously players are a massive part of our youth base, because not only they're players, but they're also fans, and they spend a lot of time dedicated to the sport in one way or another. And we're very aware that the next generation of players will be found online, whether we want it or not. The social media has already shown over and over, especially during this pandemic, when teams were starting to cut down their own scouting budgets, and they weren't really sending people to other countries to look for players. They started to rely on their phones and their computers to find the next gems. Funnily enough, I've been pushing and lobbying a lot for Angel City to become the first club to scout all their players online, because I think that's really the future. That a men's club I don't think will do, because it's just too many years doing the same thing, and it's really hard to like break that whole process. But for women, and that's the beauty of women, it's a startup, right? We can change and move much more easily, and people are much more open to new ways of doing stuff. And as I was saying, female players are much more diligent and really posting the right content and getting themselves the right visibility, so a coach somewhere in the world can find them just through their phones, right? So it's to answer your last question, which is really the differences in between men's and women, is just the longevity that the scouting processes have. And to me, women's football have an amazing advantage. I'm obviously incredibly biased towards women's football. I now made it abundantly clear, but it's really amazing to see that they will be able to do things men's would never do, even in big clubs like Barcelona and Chelsea. I mean, clubs have been around for many, many, many years. You're seeing their female franchise do things that the men's would never do, using tools that the men's would never use, and then becoming a gateway into them using it, and becoming a bit of a guinea pig, which is kind of interesting, because they're gonna get a lot of opportunities that men's won't, and they're gonna get first dibs on them. And scouting is not by far the number one way to illustrate this point.
James, how does your team use social media, whether it's YouTube or other tools to scout potential new players?
Uh, we we uh, we use a lot of we use Y Scout, and we get a ton of games from all over the world on that. We spend a lot of time looking at that. We've created a network of scouts throughout the world. We've got like 7 at the moment that are in different countries that look at specific players for us that will hopefully match our profile that we want. So we look at different ways. Agents now are becoming much, much more impactful in the league. And so we're inundated with video and everything from players. The biggest challenge I think we face is trying to work out what the level is like when you see a video. That's the hardest thing, to really go, okay, this player looks good on this video clip. And it's the same when you see college highlights and things like that. Some players look absolutely amazing on their highlight reel from college. And then there's certain bits that they don't have that will propel them into a high level in the professional game. So getting as much information on the players as possible is huge, and we use social media in all aspects, to look at them as a player, look who they are as a person. So, like every company does at the moment, the information is out there. So sometimes some people need to have a look at what they've actually posted online, and they may not want to put it on there. But it is a very useful tool. It makes everything more local than global, and you can get access to anything and everything. And I think, as we were talking, the recruitment and scouting of players is now the next thing for the growth of the league and the teams to become competitive. And I think the team or teams that get it right at the start will give themselves such an advantage over the next 10 years. It will be incredible. So it is a vital part of the development of each club in the NWSL.
That just to add to James' point around, the way that you're scouting players, it's a big part of our job at Gloria to make sure that we show you players in the right light so you can actually make good decisions, and really comparing apples to apples, because a big problem there is today in the online space is that you have a highlight reel of a player that is 5 minutes long and it's an edit of all her best goals, and then you don't see anything else, and then another player gets a highlight reel which is a 60-minute long video of maybe a compilation of some plays in a match. So it's all over the place and there's no structure, there's no standard, and players don't really know what they need to be posting or sending, so it's all over the place. And a big part of Gloria's idea is really to centralize everything and to put it in a way that once you open your phone, it's going to be pretty easy to understand the level of the player, because you're going to be looking at speed, you're going to be looking at other things that have nothing to do with a highlight video, as well as personality, which is something that is massive. Like players don't even put a video of themselves talking. You need to go on social media and kind of figure out what they're doing. But if you had like a 30-second, 45-second clip of the player saying, hey, I choose to play this game because, and this is, you can tell a lot about a player from that. So we'll be working really hard, James, and hopefully we'll get something to you soon enough and change your mind.
Excellent.
Ina, do you have any thoughts or comments on the ability to use apps to scout or recruit players?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, at least internally at Angel City, we're trying to figure that piece out too. Not having the same kind of resources as an MLS club to build out a worldwide scouting network, that can capture any and every kind of possible player and talent that we'd want to look at. So I think technology is going to be a big piece of it. So anything that's out there that kind of makes our lives a little easier, I think we're on board with exploring a little bit. But again, I think to James's point a little bit too, it's when I've worked with scouts that have at least been on the MLS side for years, they always talk about the value of seeing a player play live, and not just from having conversations with the player or his or her agent, but also just hearing the chatter of the other scouts that are watching the same player, and hearing comments about them and kind of picking up those tidbits of knowledge that can help kind of, build out the full picture of who that player is, both on and off the pitch. And so again, I mean, when it comes to Victoire, like I'd love to see what Gloria comes up with and see how that can help us. But right now we're open to anything. And I think that's actually been a point of, a topic that we brought up while doing our sporting director interviews, is really trying to understand from any of these candidates, what's your approach, and how do you kind of see the scouting and analytics piece of this club working?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, and then the pandemic sort of throws a wrench into that as well, right? Because kids aren't playing as much this past year. If they are playing, you can't always have someone on site to watch them. I guess to go back to the idea of creating highlight videos, if a player is sending in videos, trying to create their own highlight video, what makes a good one? What advice would you give to a player trying to impress you?
Is that for me?
For you or James, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be fair. I get so many videos and emails from agents and players, both still from MLS and now on the women's side too. And I just send them to our head of recruiting and analytics, because it's not my wheelhouse. And it's something that I'm kind of learning, but it's something that I don't deal with on a day-to-day basis.
James, do you have
think
any thoughts?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I do watch a lot of these videos, and there's a real tendency for there to be a trick and a flick and a goal when there's so much more to playing than just a nice little step over or a nutmeg, or they've actually scored a goal. You know, these things are nice, but if you're a centre back, I actually want to see what you can do defensively. I want to see what you can do in transition. How do you act when you lose the ball? And sometimes you miss this, even on something like Y Scout. So when you do actually see a player live and you're making those decisions, what they do off the ball at times is almost as important as what's happening on the ball. So I think it's difficult because, you know, whether they're in club soccer, even in college, the camera angle, the quality of the film, there's a lot going to making it, whether you've got access to, you know, put some graphics on, things like that. Because sometimes I watch some stuff and I don't actually know who I'm watching, and it's been sent to me, and you can't see the number and these things. So it's okay. I think I'm watching this player. So to make a decision almost blind like that, especially as we get into, if you're bringing in, you know, international players, certainly for us and the resources that are involved in bringing in an international player, we've almost got to be 100% sure that this player is going to be a huge success in the league with the investment that goes into it at this present moment. We can't gamble on two or three. We've probably got to narrow it down and hit a home run with our one pick of bringing in a top international player. So it is hard, but I think, you know, like you said, you can't get out and see things as much as we did, and we don't know when that's going to change. So, you know, the Gloria platform, I think, is a really good idea, and I'm sure we'll be looking at it and using it. So, I think any of these opportunities that players can have is so important.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I mean it's still pretty rare for a female player to sign when they're super young or a teenager, right? But we have had a few rare examples in the United States of teenage high school players being offered professional contracts, and these conversations kind of reminds me of that as well because how can you truly evaluate a player playing against high school competition and how that would translate to a professional league? Especially, yeah, just in the women's game and in the men's game when there's a lot of physical development still to go. So I think that's probably a whole other conversation that we don't have time for today. But I really appreciate you guys joining me this evening. This has been a lot of fun to learn a little bit more about your perspectives. And any final thoughts before we wrap this up? We're good? Okay. James,
I'll just say thank you very much for having me on and
yeah, same.
you know,
same.
creating this
Thank
platform that we can promote the game.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Really excited and thankful for your guys' support here tonight, and excited to keep following the teams and to check out the Gloria app when it's officially live. Maybe you can like put me on the fast track to get the inside access.
I'll send you an invite. I'll send you an invite for sure.
Okay.
All of you
good.
in this panel.
Well, thank you so much to all of our viewers here for joining us today at the 2021 Texas Soccer Summit. We resume our panels tomorrow at 1 p.m. with Glenn Davis of Houston, who will be kicking things off with Paul Daglish and Eddie Robinson as they discuss the Dynamo's back-to-back MLS Cup championships. Thank you again, and have a good night from the Striker, Texas.
All right. Thank you.